to New Year in Operations Day 2. And for those of you who haven't been here yesterday, I would like to do a quick introduction again, what we will cover in this online event, and also who I am, why I'm talking to you. So let's dive into a quick intro. And yeah, first of all, Asamby Consulting, this is our company, and my name is Benjamin. I'm the founder and CEO of Asamby Consulting, and our topic is operations, right? We help companies across the globe optimize the operations and the organizational structure. And our companies are often in the service space, but also in tech and many other different industries. So a very wide range. And also, this allows us to learn really what are things that successful companies do from an operations perspective, and what are things that you can apply to your team, to your organization, to your business 2024 to really nail operations. So this so far is a bit of background. Now, why is it important to deal with operations? There's typically 3 different motivators, I'd say, that we find why clients reach out to us, why companies, why CEOs invest time and energy and money into operations. Firstly, it's peace of mind, right? It's the ability to, unplug from work when you're not at work. It's the ability to leave the company alone for a day, a week, maybe 2 or 3 weeks to potentially go on a vacation or on a business trip without having to worry that, things break, that customers are unhappy, that things stop working, right? So it's the ability to not having to firefight, to basically be sure that your company can operate without you. All right, so that's one motivator. Another motivator is really growth. We often see that our clients are either in the midst of growing, they have grown a bit, or they're about to grow and realize that the operational basis needs to be more solid, right, to support that growth. Or after growth phase, they feel that they need to consolidate what they're doing, that they need to, align team members on best practice, and make sure whatever they are doing is sustainable and scalable. So really growth as a big driver for the work that we do, for the necessity to fix operations. And then lastly, it's profitability, right? So you can make as much money as you want top line, but if you're not efficient, then your bottom line, your profit will suffer. And this is true for both, obviously, for-profit companies as well as for not-for-profits, because then being more efficient means you just have more money to spend on your cause and on the good work that you do, right? So focus on efficiency as a driver for profitability is the third major reason why you, as a business owner, should care about operations. Okay, so when we talk about operations, what do we mean? We typically refer to operations when we talk about the 3 dimensions of process, people, and tools. Now, this sequence is chosen intentionally. We do think that people are the most important asset in your business. And I've seen this over and over again in many different successful companies, in my own companies. Having the right team, treating them well is the most important aspect of your business. However, if you look at operations, you have to start at the process, right? So if you want to think through what is a good organizational structure, what is the right job description, what is the right way of communication or collaboration, we have to start with the process first, right? We have to understand what is somebody doing, what is we as a company doing, what is a certain function doing, what are the steps involved in delivering value for a client. We got to understand and fix that first before we can effectively decide on how we structure an organization, what people we need, what a job description looks like, what motivators we might want to use in terms of compensation, etc., for people, right? So it's not a sequence by priority, but just by really sequence. What do you start with? The process first, people as a second dimension, then lastly tools. And tools is really the last step, where today oftentimes when we talk to clients, to business owners, to CEOs, there's a strong tendency to jump at automation, right? To buy a new tool set, to leverage tech and tools to solve business problems, which is great. However, we find that process needs to come first, right? You have to make sure that you do the right thing and you're doing them right. before implementing a tool. Otherwise, there's just a high risk of you getting lost in the possibilities of the tech stack, which is always a recipe for overcomplicating things. And relying on a good process first will allow you to be very intentional with your tool use and your tool setup. So these are the 3 dimensions of operations that we are tackling in these days: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yesterday we talked about onboarding at scale. So how do you build and onboard good teams, and then also how do you document processes with SOPs and how can they facilitate growth? And today what we're going to discuss is how to improve processes. So we're going to share our process improvement framework that we use with our clients, and then in around 45 minutes, Francesco, our head of consulting, will discuss how you can use job descriptions to really end chaos in your organization, right? So we've seen this over and over again. We have a very good tool and a very simple process that allows you to create a lot of clarity for your team, assign clear responsibilities, and then generate job descriptions out of that. And Francesco will walk us through how this works and how you can use that in around 45 minutes. So I would suggest let's not waste any more time and focus on our topic, how to improve any process. And to start with, process improvement, and that's very important to understand, is a never-ending endeavor, right? So you're never done with improving processes. Why? Once you fix something in a process, it works better, you can scale it, it produces new bottlenecks, right? So there's always the idea of your process can, take a certain throughput of work, but there's typically one point that can, process less units at a given time. So we call these bottlenecks, right? Or constraints. Now, once you fix one of those bottlenecks, another part of your process becomes the new constraint. Think about it this way: if you have a manual client onboarding process, where somebody has to do a lot of manual work, and you fix that, you automate parts of it, you make other parts more efficient, then you can onboard more clients. But then potentially, just to give an example, accounts receivable becomes a problem where they're not quick enough with invoicing, with collecting, right? So for removing one bottleneck, you're rewarded with another one. For resolving one problem in your business and organization, you're typically rewarded with another problem that's more complex to resolve, right? So the first message really is improving processes is an ongoing endeavor, but there is a process that we use with our clients that allows you to be very intentional about it, and that also allows you to, remain in control and also have good overview over how this works, right? So let's jump right in. The first step, if you want to improve processes, is you have to understand what are the processes that I need to improve at all, right? So there is oftentimes, we find that with clients, that there is an implicit feeling that things do not work well. And also, I know, some of the things where work falls through the cracks, where clients are unhappy, where delivery doesn't work. So you have typically a rough understanding of which processes need improvement. However, we recommend using a tool, for example, the value chain, to really map out your process landscape holistically. How this works is you would just go and, for example, we use a digital whiteboard tool. You can use a spreadsheet, you can use a Word document or Google Doc, whatever tool you're familiar with, comfortable with, and basically create categories and then collect all the processes, all the recurring tasks, if you will, that fall within that space. So this is an example for a physical manufacturing company that sells goods. The idea of the value chain is that here at the bottom you have value generating processes. Think about value generating processes as everything your clients would pay you for if they knew you were doing it. And then you have supporting processes, which your clients really don't care about, but you still need them anyway to run a company, right? So value generating processes, supporting processes, and then what you would really do is just to collect all the things that you would do underneath. So for example, purchasing could be sourcing of suppliers, issuing purchase orders, negotiation, is also logistics, might be receipt of goods, and inbound logistics, things like that, right? So and then for manufacturing, it's probably also internal logistics, it's maybe pre-assembly of goods, whatever it is, right? So you would really go and collect all the processes that you have underneath each of these categories, and typically while you do this, you come across things that don't work. We strongly encourage you to utilize the knowledge of your team for that, right? So if you have a management team, do that with your management team. If you're a small organization, have your team members involved in that, the ones that have a good overview of the company, and use them to map that, because typically the more people you involve, the more issues you unearth, right? And again, you would map the processes, and then in this example, use red sticky notes to note down issues. If you're using another tool, you might have in a spreadsheet, you have maybe the process category like purchasing and manufacturing, then you have the process name, and then you might have another column for issues. So this way you start collecting which processes might need improvement, right? So this overview is a great starting point for you to identify what process to go for. In the next step, once you have identified a good process, and again, you might have a pretty good intrinsic feeling about what needs improvement. Once you have that, you would go and map the process. And mapping the process, I mean, there's a variety of different ways. The way we would recommend doing it is using a swim lane structure, especially if you run a digital or remote company. The structure with the roles as a lane, and then the color represents a specific software tool, is something that has proven to work really well. So what you would do is you would go in and map step by step by step for each process. So in this example, say it's an onboarding, you would say, okay, client reaches out, you would use blue for that via email. Next step is we schedule a call with them over, I don't know, Calendly, right? We add the lead to our CRM in monday.com, right? So just go step by step by step. Each row here represents a role in your company. So this could be the sales rep, this could be a project manager, and this might be you as the CEO, for example, right? So you would go and map step by step by step by step who is doing what, using lanes for roles and using colors for tool sets. Now, again, what we would recommend doing is using a visual whiteboard tool like Miro in this example, or anything else, to note that down, and then use sticky notes to add notes here, to add context, and also use again red sticky notes to collect issues. Again, what you'll find is if you do that with your team will have a pretty good sense of this doesn't work really, right? So use a team for that. Keep the group small. 4 to 5 people is a good size. Make them big enough, or as big as you have to really get all the knowledge that you need, but keep them as small as possible to be effective, right? So 4 to 5 people is, I'd say, a maximum. And then map the process through and listen to what your team is telling you in terms of this doesn't work, we need a better template here, communication doesn't work, we're waiting for feedback for 2 weeks, this is too long, right? So listen for these cues of this does not work well. An example of what a process mapping like this could look like once it's done could be something like this, where you have these steps, you have the different tool set here at the top. This is a very comprehensive process from sales through delivery, so very high level. And as you see, this is typically what it looks like. Once you start mapping, there's many different issues that you could note down, right? So really, mapping the process helps you to identify all the stuff that does not work along the way. And again, at any given time, typically only one of these issues is the constraint. Once you remove that, another issue becomes the constraint, right? If this group of issues here limits your throughput to 1 client a week, and you remove that, then maybe this one here limits your throughput to 2 clients a week, right? So you'll have to comprehensively map all the issues in the process to really have a good list of things to work on, and to then process further. And processing further here means that you will now go and cluster the findings, cluster the red sticky notes that you have into groups. Now you could use these high-level categories that we use to think about organization, processes, organization, and tools. You could also say that, for example, you go a bit more granular, and under tools, you might have a subcategory that's called templates, for example, right? Where whenever you note down in the process capture that you're missing a template or that there's no templatized version of sending out a client email, of creating a new proposal, etc., then you would summarize this under, you know, a subcategory here that's called templates, right? And you would have basically a group of issues that is that tells you, okay, we need to create more templates, right? So you could group them together. You know, might want to group them also because you don't want to deal with like 30 or 40 different issues, right? Because then processing them becomes a bit more difficult. So if you can, and if something is of similar nature to something else, and also the potential solution is similar, then it makes sense to group things together. But I think you know, a high level structure, structuring issues into these categories is a good starting point. And again, if you want to go more granular, then you can. So this will be the next step for you to, so you map your process, you identify the issues, and then you take those issues and cluster them by category or group them into similar items, right? So next step would be to then say, okay, now I have these groups of issues or these issues that have been sorted. So which ones are actually meaningful to tackle, right? Because in any given process, you'll find things that are very critical to resolve and to improve, and then there are others that are nice to have. And the way we recommend doing this is using an impact effort matrix. So you've mapped your process. Out of that came a list of issues that you have either grouped or just sorted by category. And now in the next step, you and you can again do this together with your team, you decide on where each of these issues sits with regards to impact and effort. So, for example, thinking about you know, our proposal, we don't have a standard proposal that we use, right? So what's the effort of creating that, of changing that, and what's the impact if you changed that, right? And what you're looking for obviously is quick wins, which is low effort, high impact. So the things that would make a big change but don't really cause a lot of work to resolve, this is the stuff that you want to do first, right? Because it'll improve your process pretty quickly. The second part that you want to look at is major projects. So the quadrant where effort is rather high, but impact is as well, right? You probably want to ignore, for the most part, the low impact items, unless they're very, very easy, very low effort to execute, but focus on what really moves the needle. Typically, if you improve, let's say the Pareto 20% of issues that cause 80% of the constraint in your process, you've done well, right? So focus on what has high impact and start with what has low effort, and then move into the higher effort initiatives. So now what you have is you've mapped your process, you've identified issues, you've clustered them, and now you've prioritized them, right? And this priority can be reflected in a initiative metrics, where now you say, okay, if I'm starting to resolve my, high level, high impact, low to mid effort issues, how am I doing that, right? And now typically, once you have a clear understanding of your issue and where it sits, and if it's something that you want to tackle, the solution oftentimes is not as complex, right? So you could go and say, I will derive an initiative from that. Now, where you say, okay, let's take this example here. We have a bottleneck on the accounting side, right? We might want to fix that. We have junior team that makes mistakes, right? So all of these things you can map here, right? And basically cluster again by effort and impact or importance. And once you have this comprehensive list, you will also, see, okay, which are the things. Green ones obviously is where effort is low and impact is high, that you want to start with. But the next thing is that or these are the issues, right, that you have identified. And now what you'll do is you'll map potential initiatives to resolve those, right? The reality of operations improvement is that these 3 dimensions that I mentioned before, people, processes, tools, they're all connected. So what this means is that when you work on operations initiatives, they will rarely solve a problem alone, right? So one change will rarely solve a problem completely, but also everything that you do work on typically impacts more than one dimension of your company, right? So a matrix like this one here is really a great tool to map. This is what I'm doing. This is how it addresses the issues that I have identified, right? And obviously what you want to do is you want to start with initiatives that address the most high impact, low effort process issues, right? So really having this overview allows you to say, if I fix my responsibilities by creating a racing matrix, which, by the way, the topic that we're going to hear in a second from Francesco, if you look at this, I mean, this touches on many, many different issues that you have identified, right? Whereas if you said, let's have a better tracking tool, the impact here is not as big, right? So this will allow you to really focus on what is the highest level, the highest impact initiative that I could focus on. And with that list, what you can then do is you take all these initiatives that you have thought through and that you want to tackle and basically translate them into some form of tracking, right? So the idea is now we have an understanding of what we want to do. So we've seen that there are unclear responsibilities. We've seen that, stick to that example, right? That people make mistakes, that there are things that are not being followed through. So fixing clear responsibilities might help with that. So we have now a list of, okay, we want to do that. We want to, create a clear set of responsibilities with the racing metrics. And we have many other different initiatives. So now what you want to do is, because you can't do everything on by yourself, you want to have a tracking tool, which typically will be in your task management tool if you have one, right? So that might be Asana, ClickUp, something like that, where you have the possibility to assign tasks. It might also just be a spreadsheet in which you track this. But what you want to do is list all your initiatives and assign responsibilities, right? Because you don't want to do them all by yourself, but you want to utilize your team to do that. And typically, the stages that we, if we really simplify it down, the stages that we would be looking at is for each issue might either be open because you haven't started working on it. You might be in a solution design phase where you say, okay, let's work on how we want to do it in the future, and then there's typically an implementation part. You could even break it down and just and get more simplified and say it's open, in progress, and done. We find that often it makes sense to say we're discussing a solution, or we're discussing what a solution looks like, and then let's track implementation. And only if something has really been established, has become second nature for the team, and everybody uses this and has no questions anymore, then we move it into done. We find that if there's often the likelihood of designing a solution, but then not really following through with it. So I recommend breaking up the status into solution design and implementation. So if we think about an improved racing matrix for better job descriptions, you would basically do the racing matrix and develop it, and Francesco will lead us through how that works in a few minutes. Do the racing matrix and develop it, and then in the implementation part, you would basically go and discuss job descriptions with the team and make sure everybody has a clear understanding, is signing off on their responsibilities, etc., right? To execute this process, what you can do, and this is also what we recommend for continuous improvement, once you have a list of items that you want to address, have a weekly meeting and just monitor progress with your team. Many of these items might be very, very, very quick to fix, right? So it doesn't always have to be a multiple week effort, but for the ones that are a bit larger and that take a bit more time and where implementation is a bit more complex, it makes sense to have a regular touch point with everybody in your team and make sure that, for example, Anna has been assigned drafting a long-term organizational chart. to make sure that Anna obviously is following through with that, to discuss the progress, and then also to discuss implementation with her, just to keep track on these things. Also, you might want to add due dates to manage the process a bit more thoroughly, right? But really, deriving these initiatives, assigning them, and then just keeping track of them in some form of tool is a key to improving processes, because let's face it, I mean, process improvement can be very granular, can be very nitty-gritty, and also takes some time, right? So keeping track, not losing overview is critical, and that's why a Kanban board or any other form of tracking of what you're working on with regards to your processes will be great. And again, once you're not a solopreneur anymore, but have a team that you can involve in process improvement, it makes sense to have a tool where everybody sees what the responsibilities is, what the status is of all the tasks that are ongoing, and track that properly, right? So assuming you're working on that, so you're moving on, your team executes on the improvements. The next step then would be to design or document for processes, build SOPs if that makes sense for you, if that's a good format of documenting for you, build workflows, which is the more elegant way of doing it. And we talked about SOPs yesterday, so they're a good tool, but then also it doesn't always make sense to have a fully built out SOP structure, especially in the very early stages of your company when processes are very fluid and flexible. So you want to be intentional about how you document core processes, but any improvement effort should lead into some form of improved body of work, right? So it might either be an improved workflow, it might be an improved SOP. If you just discuss and there's no tangible change in any institutional piece of your business, then there's a high likelihood of things not sticking, right? So always for implementation, you want to make sure that there's some some tangible thing that has changed, right? Could be an updated template, could be a changed job description, right? So you want to document your changes, and this could either be again in the form of SOPs or just in an updated process chart, etc., right? And then the last bit really, and now this is just a placeholder for what training can look like, is really process handover and training. Now, this depends a lot on how large your organization is. If you have improved a process, and for example, let's stick to that example, Anna was responsible for doing that, right? Depending on how many people the process affects, you will have to manage change and hand over this new process, right? So let's assume you have a new template in your project management tool for, I don't know, onboarding clients or for delivering some piece of client work. You'll have to train your team on that new process, right? So they have to understand what are the changes. And also you'll have to manage that change and monitor implementation, because there are two things that will happen. One is obviously people need time to adopt new practices. So you want to be there along the way to make sure that questions are being answered and that feedback is heard, etc., right? And just really nudge people to follow that new process, especially if you're changing processes that have been run in the same way for a long time. So that is one component. The other component in this process handover is really you learning what works and what doesn't. We often have clients that tells I want this, I want to build the perfect process for this, and in our experience that doesn't work. The reality is that you're much more effectively improving your organization if you build incremental improvements step by step and add to them as you go, right? So the process handover and conversations with your team about, okay, we have changed this, like sticking to the example, client onboarding process, having a regular conversation about how this works, how it unfolds, how it, if it does what it's supposed to do, if it brought the improvements that you were hoping for, that will foster an ongoing discussion about, okay, what else could we do? Because again, as mentioned when I started, you're never done with that, right? So process handover and change management is both to enable your team to really execute the new process well, as well as you or whoever created that new process can learn what else needs to be done where you might have got it wrong, where you might want to tweak or change the new layout to be even more effective or efficient, right? So really take time to implement that new process. And it's really, you know, that there's this saying that change is not a point in time, but it's a process, right? So you want to take time for your team to adopt the new practices and have an open ear on their feedback, right? So to really sum up what the steps are, finding the processes that you want to improve is the first step. Focus on the ones that really are at the value chain of your company, not the supporting processes. I mean, obviously, if your supporting processes cause a lot of pain, it might be a good point to start there, right? So let's assume you collect very, very little percentages of your outgoing invoices and you have a cash flow problem based on that. Obviously, it's a good starting point, right? But as a standard, I'd say focus on the value generating processes, because these are the ones that your clients will experience, and that will ultimately drive business success, because either clients spend more, stay longer, refer your business, etc. Right? So focus on the value generating processes to identify which processes to improve. Next, map processes to find issues. Again, just visual mapping together with the team is a great tool to unearth all these little nitty-gritty things that don't work. And you'll typically find many of those things if you discuss a process with your team. In the third step, cluster and prioritize these issues based on impact and effort, right? So you want to build groups of similar items, and then take these issues or groups of issues and think through, if I fix that, what's the impact, right? And if I fix that, what's the effort? And you want to go for high impact, low effort issues, and then move on to high impact, high effort issues to really address the stuff that moves the needle, right? And don't worry and don't bother with the low impact items. Fourth step, derive and map initiatives, right? So you want to develop initiatives and map them against the issues that you've identified and focus on initiatives that are addressing most of the high impact, low effort issues. In the fifth step, you don't want to do it alone. Assign these initiatives and track progress, right? So assign improving XYZ process to the person that's responsible for it. Have somebody support you in creating new job descriptions, etc., whatever it is, assign them, don't do it alone, and track progress. Document improved processes. So you want to make sure that there's something that changes inside of your company after all the discussion. And this will also in parallel help you build out a culture of really, documenting the core pieces of your business, right? So you want to document whatever you do in some shape or form that is suitable for your company. Ideally, if you have something that works for you, use that format, but just document the new and improved version of the process. And then lastly, train the team and manage the change in a bidirectional way, meaning you obviously want to train people on adoption of the new process, but you also want to have an open ear to learn, is it really working well? Is it really doing what it should do, this change? Is it improving? Is it, are we making our lives easier, clients happier? Or do we not, reach our desired goal with that process improvement? So really, don't stop at, we have a new solution, go and do it, but rather we have this new solution. Now let's see for the next 1 or 2 weeks, 3 or 4 months, whatever, depending on the complexity and the throughput that you have. Let's see how this actually translate into, a better business. Okay. So these will be our 7 steps to improve a process. Obviously, many of these steps are very quick, right? So not all of them are really, require you to work an hour long on this, but rather might come very organically to you and very quick. But following this framework, this mindset of being intentional about what you improve, what you select for improvement, and then assigning that will help to really keep traction high, because again, process improvement is a nitty-gritty work, right? And it's never done. So having some form of transparency, of a repeatable process to engage in these exercises regularly helps to do that well.